I saw your house. It's like a museum.
So my mother has been a very strong influence in my life. She was very interested in buying, old things from southern parts of India, Tankha paintings, pitchwise. She used to love pitchwise. I don't think it's important to have a bucket list because then you're collecting names. All his experiences and his emotions sort of deposited in that artwork. So what you're buying is that energy and how that energy which he has deposited relates to your energy. Like a painting is alive. Don't consider that it is a sort of an inanimate object. The ones that I just absolutely love and are very, very special to me are the Ambadasis.
Okay.
I feel that art is not meant to be understood, it is meant to be perceived or felt.
So let's take a walk around.
Okay.
Let's have a look at the possessions that you really feel proud of. Hello and welcome to our new podcast focusing on art and art enthusiasts. Today we have with us Dr. Shruti Lakhanpal Tandon, dermatologist by profession, art collector by heart, and founder of Ushat Art Foundation. Hello, ma'am, and welcome to our show.
Hi, Kshitij. Thank you.
Uh, I saw your house. It's like a museum. Beautiful art pieces are here. I would love to hear from you when this art started influencing you.
So, I am, of course, a dermatologist by profession,
Yes.
and I'm Delhi based.
Mhm.
And as you know, Delhi is full of galleries. But my schooling was done in Dehradun, in Vellum Girls School, where art was actually a very important part of the curriculum. And art was also a subject which a lot of my friends took. And, we from then that time we were used to seeing a lot of girls spend hours and hours on art because it was a subject in which you gave your board exams. Also, my mother has been a very strong influence in my life in respect to all things, but especially so for art. And she was very fond of art and she would collect, and she was friends with a lot of artists like Jahangir Sabawala, who's a very big name in the art world, and she was on a very friendly term with them. And when you grow up in a space looking at art, then your eyes develop in a way that you get used to looking at art, and a maturity comes in your ways of looking at art. And I think that helped me a lot. But then, of course, with medical studies are very intensive.
That's what my
And
question was. How did you made an effort
yeah,
while studying for
so,
medical for art?
yeah, so it didn't happen while I was studying medicine, because studying medicine gives you pretty much no time for anything else.
Absolutely.
But then what happened is that for my senior residency, I went to All India Institute of Medical Sciences. And as you know, Hoskas village is very close to All India Institute.
Yes, yes, yes.
And that was the time I had finished my MD. So I was doing what they call a senior residency, where people who are doing MD are under you. So you've already finished your MD, so you don't have to give any exams. You're not really studying in that sense. So I had more time.
Okay.
And what used to happen is that we used to have duties. The senior resident used to have duties on weekends where you had to stay. So we were staying on campus. Vivek was also pursuing his GI surgery, and we were staying on the campus. We weren't staying at home. So on weekends, we used to have pagers. उस समय mobile phones थे नहीं.
Pager.
So the
Yes.
pager range used to be till Hoskas village. So I would go to the galleries over there and then, interact with the gallery owners, talk to them about artists. And that's how it really started, with just seeing art as I was growing up, and then visiting gallery spaces and looking at art. We have the National Gallery of Modern Art in Delhi. So going there, seeing retrospectives, reading about it, and that's how it started.
How often do you used to go with your mother for art shopping and all?
So for art shopping, not really.
Not
Not
really.
really, no. So because art has always been expensive, so one
Yes.
didn't really sort of go shopping for art. But with her, I used to go more to, there was this shop in Sundar Nagar called India Arts Palace. And as a little girl, I remember going there with her, and she was very interested in buying, old things from southern parts of India, Tankha paintings, Pitchwise. She used to love Pitchwise. And then again, that was a space where the people who were in charge of that shop had a lot of knowledge. So we would actually, I would sit with my mother, and it was never like a 15-minute come in, go out. It would be hours discussing works, or when she wanted to pick up pieces, discussing the history behind that piece. And that in itself is also an education,
Absolutely.
because you learn it when you're young and you get primed to seeing. So if you're, say for Pitchwise, if you're seeing 5 Pitchwise and buying one, then you are already evaluating the good things about the one that you're buying. And so that in itself is an education. So with her, it was more of that. It was not so much of what you're talking about is contemporary visual art. So it was not so much shopping for that. It was more shopping for the traditional Indian arts.
But you developed a sort of a taste for even contemporary and modern art at a later stage.
Yeah.
How did that develop in you?
I think that is also a very individual thing. But at the same time, you also have to hone that skill. So my father-in-law was one of his friend's daughters owned a gallery called Dhumimal Gallery in Delhi. They are actually the first art gallery in India. So when I wanted to then start buying art, because that came up much later when I was in my early 30s, because before that, when you're studying, then you're pretty much not earning anything. Even in All India Institute, I think our pay was maybe 8,000 rupees for a month. So when then we got into practice and we started earning, and I wanted to buy art, then my father-in-law said that you go to Uma Jain is her name. And so she was actually really great for me, because she knew that I came, I was my father-in-law's daughter-in-law. She told me that for 6 months you will just come and see, because you've never bought art. So you don't know what you like, and you don't know, because if you buy something, then you're probably going to be living with it for the rest of your life. So you must know that you really like it. So when the first time I went, I actually chose 2-3 pieces, and she didn't let me buy them. She said, no, you're not going to buy for 6 months. You will just come, look, go back home. And then after 6 months, when I was sure of the ones that I wanted, she said, okay, now you're going to take them home and live with them for a month. And if you don't like them, you can just return them.
Oh, that's something.
So she really encouraged me to start seeing. And I think seeing is a very big thing. So it's important to educate yourself, because then you are able to also, when you have a sort of a perception of the artist's journey, you also have a perception of the works that may have not been very good by that artist, and the works which sort of transcend things and become masterpieces. So I think it's very important to educate yourself. As a buyer, you have the onus of educating yourself, especially now with so many galleries there. I mean, let's say in Delhi, how many of us have gone into the National Gallery of Modern Art?
Absolutely.
Currently, there's a retrospective by Nicholas Roerich, which is astounding. I mean, to see so many works in one space, nobody knows, nobody has gone there. And
It's
Roerich,
quite grand.
yeah.
I've been there.
So
It's quite grand.
it's the onus of educating yourself about art and artists is your own.
How do you decide which art or the artist you really want to possess? I mean, is there any kind of a bucket list you have?
No.
Or how do you go about it?
I think for me, the heart tells me. I just relate to a work, and I just feel that, this belongs to me.
Okay.
And of course, a lot belong to me, which are way beyond my budget. But
That's what I was coming to actually.
yeah. So, but what happens? I also started collecting very early.
Yes.
So I started collecting maybe in the early 1900s. 1991, 1992, when art was not at the prices that it is in now. So that advantage I did have, that I started collecting. And because I had been looking and seeing art, I think I also collected people who are becoming very important now. So that, but if for collectors, for new collectors, if they start looking now and they start, finding who are the good people, then 30 years down the line, it'll be the same as,
Absolutely.
so that is important. And I think you have to connect with an artwork. It's not important to have a bucket list. I don't think it's important to have a bucket list, because then you're collecting names.
Right.
You should not be collecting names, because a painting is, uh, the artist who has spent time. Firstly, painting, an artist, a painter, has a very lonely life in his studio, because in his studio it's only him and his canvas, और तो कुछ है नहीं. Nobody else is allowed, usually while they are painting. So all his experiences and his emotions and what he's going through at that time gets sort of deposited in that artwork. So what you're buying is that energy, and how that energy which he has deposited relates to your energy. So that is what you're buying. So how can you collect names? You can't. You should not, at least, I feel.
My question was actually something that you really want to possess. You are right now seeking, looking after, okay, this is something I really want right now. Something you are probably, looking around the galleries nowadays. Something that you probably want to add to your collection.
It's again, like currently the person I'm collecting is a young artist in Shanti Niketan. He's
Okay.
not well known. He's a print, he doesn't even paint. He's a graphic printmaker. He does woodcuts.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I collect his work because I really relate to it. He makes trees and, valleys and just sunsets and very small format work. So I think when you look at more works that are being done, and these days a lot of the younger artists are doing really good works, uh, I think collection should be based on that, on something which really relates to you, somebody's body of work, which is really sort of, you just sort of synchronize with it. And so I don't have a bucket list. There's nobody who I think of that now I want to collect. It's just that when I go to shows, when I go to retrospectives, and I start responding to somebody's work, and then I want to collect that person.
How do you balance your medical career and your pursuit for art now?
So a large part of my life, see, I got into medical college when I was maybe 18 years old. And after that, a good many years was just spent in the pursuit of medicine. So at that time, it's life is very different. You don't have time for anything else pretty much except for your studies. But then after that, I started, when you come into practice, when you've got your degrees, then automatically it slows down. And the field that I'm in, dermatology, is, we don't have, in private setup at least, there are not many emergencies. So your timings are pretty much set. Unlike my husband, who's a surgeon, so it can be just any time, you can get called. So that slowed down, and it gave me time to look more at art. And then what happened is that, when COVID hit, then for the first time, I was in a situation where I was not going to the hospital every day. Because I had not experienced that since 1984, and COVID was like in 2020. So for the first time in my adult life, there was a time when I was not having to go to the hospital every day, and that sort of gave me a sort of a freedom. And around that time, I started my art foundation. In fact, I had been thinking about it for the past 10 years. So I think since 2007, 2009, I'd been thinking about doing something, other than just collecting art, doing something else with art, because I felt that art had given me so much joy, that I must do something for the artists and something to bring art to the younger generation also.
So I really wanted to talk about your foundation also,
Yeah.
Ishaat Art Foundation.
Yeah.
What is it about? what are you exactly doing in that foundation? What does it aim for?
Yeah. So Usharth Art Foundation I started in 2019,
Mm-hmm.
and I named it Usharth because my mother's name was Usha. We lost her in 2016. So Usha and Earth. So what it actually means that the true Usha is dawn, no? It's जब उषा होती है तो वो dawn होता है. So and Earth is meaning. So the true purpose of a new dawn is a new awakening. या अर्थ जो डॉन का अर्थ है whether is so that I correlated to bringing art to students initially. That is how it started. So initially I started collaborating with say the National Gallery of Modern Art and schools and educational institutes, and getting the curator to them. And I also started working with deaf children because you know just because they're deaf and they can't talk doesn't mean they can't see and appreciate art. And there's a school here in Noida called Noida Deaf Society, and they work with smaller children who sort of they can't hear, and also older children. And I started working a lot with them, and they found it also as a medium of expression, to and to know about our old art, artists, our masters. So just that is how the whole concept started. But then during COVID, I couldn't do what I was doing because schools were shut. You couldn't take anyone, to museums. You couldn't take kids to museums. So then I have always been very interested in, what is an artist's journey? What led him to create what he is creating now? So, sort of these stories, which were, I felt that people see paintings, but what is the thought behind the artist who's created those? What are his life experiences? Nobody gets to see that. Nobody gets to hear about that. So I thought that why not record these stories and these journeys of artists? What were their circumstances? What led them to art? How have they progressed in life? What are the teachers who influenced them? Because a lot of them have had. What are the art institutions which influence them? So Delhi College of Art, JJ School of Art. People feel very passionate about their art institutions and art teachers, and these stories have not really been documented. So during COVID, I actually learned, because I didn't have to go to the hospital. So I learned how to record, I learned how to edit, and I started then recording these interview based documentaries, and I called them The Way I See, because as I told you, I've always felt that seeing is a very important part in learning anything about art. So they're called The Way I See, and I've done 9 till now with different artists. And last year and the year before last, I actually did it on artists who were educated at Sir JJ School of Art in Mumbai, and they came to know about it, and they actually invited me on their Teachers' Day function to screen those films for the entire faculty and student body. So that was a very enriching experience to do that in JJ. And so that's now primarily that is what I'm doing, making these documentaries.
Those your documentaries that you have produced, are they available online?
No, they're not.
You keep them private.
I keep them private, and I like to screen them privately at art colleges and of course galleries also, but primarily at educational institutes, because I like the interaction that gives me with the audience. So like last to last year, the movie I screened was a film on an artist called Amba Das, whose works you see over there. So it was his birth centenary, and he is one of the masters of the Indian art world. But he, at the age of 50, had actually gone to Norway. And he was very sort of reclusive. He didn't really talk to the media. So his wife, who still lives in Norway, is a friend of one of the advisors to my foundation called Mr. Prayag Shukla. He's a very senior art critic and an art writer and a poet. And she told him in his centenary that, Prayagji, I think India has forgotten Amba Das. Nobody remembers him, because actually centenary is a big occasion. So then Usharth Art Foundation, we decided to do something. So we published a book on Amba Das, and I made a film on him called Celebrating Amba Das. And then that I took to JJ and showed it to them. And what was very satisfying is to have so many students come to me of JJ and say that, you know, this is the first time we are seeing Amba Das's works.
They're
So
not
we
aware
don't,
of it.
yeah, they were not even aware of him, and he's their alumni. And so we donated the books to the JJ library so that the children would have, you know, free access to his writings, what people had written on him, what people thought about his works in the days that he was, you know, actively working.
So, what other artists you have worked with
For the
for
films,
for the
for the
documentaries?
films.
Yes.
So Gopi Gajwani ji is a very senior artist. He's now, I think, 93 years of age.
So you've been in touch with them?
Oh yeah, they come here regularly for lunches. Gopi ji says कि जैसी यहाँ beer मिलती है वैसी कहीं नहीं मिलती. Yeah. So what has really been good for me is that most of the people who I've interviewed, because you know, doing these documentaries is a very intense process. So I research it for about 3-4 months, because such senior people, you can't just sit in front of them without your research.
Right.
You know, you have to know. I mean, if they've had 60-70 years of working, you need to know कि कैसे शुरू हुआ, कैसे progress किया, to be able to even ask them anything. So, and then when I do the interviews, it's usually done over a period of 5, 6, 7 days. So in that process, you know, one is going to their studios, sitting with them for hours. So what happens is that initial sort of formality breaks down, because they're also talking about very personal experiences of theirs, now what they felt about their teachers, about their student days, about. So when you finish the documentary, then they actually become friends. And my daughter always laughs and she says, all your friends are over 75 years of age. So I say, but you know, from them you get so much wisdom. Their ways of seeing are very different to what we see at our age, because they have, you know, experienced those many more years of life. So
Any memorable incident that happened while shooting these biographies?
any memorable incident?
Something
Think
that
of.
probably sticks with you and you always share with people.
Well, not during the course of shooting, I think, but like I went to Bhopal, and I was going to Bhopal I went as a kid, but in my adult life, I was going for the first time to shoot a film on an artist called Yusuf
Okay.
Ji. And so his studio and his home are very, you know, close by. And so we spent 3-4 hours shooting, and then I thought that, you know, I'll go and get lunch. I'll find a place, because I was all alone. But his wife said that no, you can't go anywhere, you have to have lunch in our house. And she is a vegetarian, but because she knew I liked, she had made non-veg kebabs for me. And you know, every day I went for shooting 3-4 days, and every day she would feed me lunch. And I felt that I'm not alone in Bhopal, that, you know, Bhopal is not a new city for me. So that those kind of personal things happen, which, you know, which really get you close. So now I feel like for Yusuf ji also, and for all the people that I've made films on, I feel very connected to them.
Obviously, when you're spending 6-7 days with
Days,
them,
yeah,
and you're documenting their life,
yeah,
and they're opening up with you,
yeah,
it's obviously, you know, you get friendly
yeah,
and connected.
yeah. So and then also what happens is that you view their art also differently.
Absolutely.
You know,
Then
because
you can
it's,
see the hardships
yeah.
and their whole life.
No,
in
not
their
only
art.
that, their passion.
Their passion.
You know, their passion.
Absolutely.
Like Yusuf ji said something to me, which is again very interesting. He said that जभी भी कोई, he is of the firm belief. He says कि a piece of art is not a dead thing. It's alive. Like a painting is alive. Don't consider that it is a sort of an inanimate object. He says कि और alive इसलिए है कि जैसे अगर आप कहीं बैठे हो और वहां कहीं पेंटिंग होगी, तो वो बार बार आपको बोलेगी कि मेरी तरफ देखो. Which is true. Like if you're sitting
Absolutely.
here, there are things
Right.
which are telling you कि नहीं, मेरी
Look
तरफ
at me.
देखो.
Right.
And he says कि अगर आप उधर देखोगे तो वो फिर आपका सर खींच लेगी कि नहीं मेरी तरफ देखो. And so that was something which was very interesting, and I felt that it's so true, you know.
And in your house, I can really relate to a lot of
That-
art which are asking me to look at
Look,
me,
yeah,
look at me,
yeah,
and look
yeah.
at me.
So that's what he said. How can they be inanimate when they are making you do that? So that
Regarding your Ushad Foundation, Art Foundation, I wanted to ask you, like you were also, working with a lot of children,
Yeah.
especially the disabled ones
Yeah.
and the unprivileged ones.
Yeah.
Anything, any of your experience where you felt that it has really changed the life of some kids or any person in that through that foundation actually?
I think what has been very satisfying, I did work with a lot of underprivileged children, especially in Dehradun. There is a organization called the Asra Trust,
Okay.
and Asra Trust rehabilitates street children. So children who are begging on the streets, it gets them into mainstream education, and it educates them. So with them, and then there's a institute called Purkal Youth Development Foundation
In Dehradun?
in Dehradun. So
Okay.
over there, there was this gentleman called Mr. Swami who's no longer alive. He started Purkul, and what they did is that in the mountain regions of Uttarakhand, wherever they found girls who were very good in studies, but because in the mountains they didn't have higher education, or the families couldn't afford to educate them, they got them to Purkul, and it's a residential school, and they educated them. So I was doing a lot of work with them, with Purkul and Asra, and I found that what was very interesting is that their perception of art is, they relate to it very deeply. And as one of the teachers told me, is that they've had, from a young age, they've had so much hardship in their life. From, like, our children are so protected, but these kids have seen no food, no water. The Asra children have seen being, begging on the streets. So when you show them something which is full of color, full of joy, full of happiness, it gives them also that feeling of joy and happiness. And also when you show them, the works of masters, like say you show them Jamini Roy, Nandlal Bose, all our masters, it gives them that feeling of heritage also.
So how do you,
Inheritance.
मतलब आप उनके साथ what do you do exactly? I mean, is it
So-
some kind of shows you organize,
No.
or is it something
What
like
I was doing with them was that I was taking the curators from National Gallery of Modern Art there to them,
okay,
and he was showing them how a museum is and discussing the works of the masters with them. So showing them just pictures of the masters, but telling them कि उन्होंने ऐसे क्यों किया और ये क्यों बनाया और ये कलर क्यों यूज किए. So something which normally no one would have gone and told them.
right?
And then there's a foundation here also called the Vahani Foundation, which educates children from financially underprivileged backgrounds, and who are very very good in studies, get very high marks, and it puts them through college education. So now these Vahani scholars, we call them the Vahani scholars, they are studying in all the IITs, IIMs, Lady Shri Ram College, because they're very academically very bright children, but financially underprivileged. So for them, because they're Delhi based, I take them for shows, some good gallery shows. Like there was a show which is how to interpret the Mahatma Gandhi. 3 artists interpreting Mahatma Gandhi. So, and then we organize curated walks. So there's a person who's taking you through that entire show and giving you that perspective. And these children, like, there were about, I think, 20 of them. And the curator first made them stand and say, okay, these are first year, second year college kids. And said that, how do you perceive Mahatma Gandhi? What is Mahatma Gandhi to you? And I know that for our kids, if somebody asks them, even if then what is Mahatma Gandhi, they'll be blank. But these kids each had an answer, of some. They had read Mahatma Gandhi's autobiography. Each one had an answer that, okay, for me, he means determination. He did the salt that wo jo
Dandi
salt,
March.
and everyone had an answer. And then when they viewed the works, they had very interesting perspectives on it.
But I think these kind of guided gallery tours, I think they are good for the other schools also. Even
Yeah,
though if it is not like for even privileged kids,
yeah,
I don't think they
absolutely.
get many opportunities in their
Opportunities,
schools
yeah,
to
yeah,
visit
visit,
like you just mentioned
yeah,
before
yeah,
that how many people have actually visited
visited,
modern art
yeah,
gallery.
yeah,
People don't
exactly.
really go
People
there.
don't,
I mean, kids really don't like probably
yeah,
going there
yeah.
because they feel they're just going for a guided tour or
Tour,
just
yeah,
going looking at
yeah,
the
yeah.
paintings.
So, and then I
Probably.
think what's also important is that, like, when I took them to the gallery tour, then with the gallery curator, we organized a drawing session after that.
Hmm.
So the foundation gave them books and crayons and color pencils. And after we went for a tour, we just sat in a hall and they were asked to draw whatever appealed to them. So you spend an hour doing that, so
What age? What age
so they're
kids do you
different. Some of
normally?
initially when I took the deaf children also for a gallery tour of the NGMA. At that time they were like, I think they were 7 8 years old to
Oh, quite
12
young.
13 years old. But this time what I did is I collaborated with the India Art Fair.
Okay,
The India Art Fair, which happens once a year in
once a
Delhi in
year.
the Okhla grounds. So I collaborated with them, and to their credit, they gave me free passes for 26 children.
Okay.
And each pass is actually for, I think, 7 8 thousand rupees. So
Oh,
they gave me 26 free passes, and we took the deaf children for to the India Art Fair, and we had sign language interpreters, which was given by the school, by Noida Deaf Society. And also this year, Kiran Nadar Museum of Art had set up a special space at the India Art Fair where they were working with deaf children. There's this gentleman called Siddharth Shah who deals a lot with art and visually impaired. So he had organized things also in that area where they were making collages, asking children to make collages, uh, visually impaired also, and hearing impaired children, with sign language interpreters, on certain artists. Like one day it was, say, Cubism, art movements. So relating Picasso and Cubism, and then giving them paper and saying, okay, now we've explained to you about Cubism. You make a collage on what now you feel Cubism is
so there only at the fair.
at the fair. And then,
So it must have been a quite long.
yeah, it was morning till evening. It's the
Okay.
whole day's thing. And then, in fact, the art fair also, to my complete delight, organized lunch for all these children,
Oh.
a free lunch. And then we took them on a curated round with curators from Kiran Nadar to show them various things. And then what was interesting is that now, because I know so many artists who were displaying at the fair, so every time I would meet someone, I know I would catch him and say, "Acha, ab ye bachcho se baat karo." So they would talk to them about, so that thing of their work is displayed at the art fair, and then they are telling you about their work. So there was this one artist called, I think he's Arun Singh, who comes from a family of carpenters. So he was in a village away from Bengal, a little from Calcutta, near Calcutta, where his family occupation is carpentry. So he wanted to do art. So he ran away from home at the age of 12 and reached Calcutta. And then he got admission into the art college. And now what he does is he does sculptures with wood. So he's transformed his family profession into art.
Into art.
And he spoke to the children on how he uses wood. And what he creates with that wood are things from his village. So there'll be a charpai with, those bartans over there.
So those experience could be like quite enriching and encouraging rather.
Yeah. So in fact, after he met the kids, he started crying.
Hmm.
Yeah, he says, I'm just so moved that I'm
Could relate.
talking to them about my art. And then, they're with the sign language interpreters. And then they ask, I mean, we feel that just because they can't hear and talk, that there's no conversation. But if you move with this bunch of kids, they are talking non-stop with their hands. And they're
Yes.
fighting and talking and, arguing and discussing. It's very vibrant.
There are so many artists who have been in the past who, despite their disabilities, were able to do excellent
Yes,
and rather are being examples now.
absolutely.
Uh, like for example, I think Satish Gujral.
Satish Gujral, yes, Satish Gujral is a big name. He is one of the masters of the Indian art world. He couldn't talk, he couldn't hear, and he was an architect. He's designed, I think, the Swedish embassy, and he was of course, an artist.
Even the Van Gogh, I guess, even he was. I suppose he also faced a lot of hardships with related to his
Mental,
emotions,
mental.
mental
He
emotions
had
and all.
a psychiatric issue, and he was a lot of the really famous paintings that Van Gogh has painted were from his psychiatry ward.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, it's so just because you lack one ability
Hmm.
doesn't mean that you don't have another. In fact, what they say is that अगर एक चली
दरवाजा.
जाती है तो दूसरी और भी vibrant हो जाती है और भी sharpened हो जाती है.
I do feel that rather, you know what, if there's something missing in you, you put so much effort in that direction
Yeah.
that you get master in that
In
field,
that,
sort
yeah,
of.
yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
there is nothing else to focus on. This is my focus point,
Focus.
so I have to move in
Do
the
that.
direction. This will something I will master.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
Okay, out of all your collection, which is the most, I mean, something that you really feel proud of? I just want to take the direction into something more interesting for my viewers, actually.
See, the ones that I just absolutely love and are very, very special to me are the Ambadases.
Okay.
So Ambadas is an artist who I just adore his work, and I relate to it, very deeply. I mean, I really, I feel that the vibrations of his work just fill my space, or enrich my life, and that's why I was so happy to be able to do that centenary celebration for him, because I mean, it's strange, but I felt such a connection with him during that time. So I think his works are very, very special to me.
So let's take a walk around.
Okay.
Let's have a look at the possessions that you really feel proud of.
Okay. These are some works of Ambadas who I've talked about. And Ambadas used to paint abstract. And abstract mainly means that there's no figure, recognizable figure in that work. So he always painted abstract work. He studied at Sir J.J. School of Art and then went to Norway after he got married at the age of 50 years.
So he was most of the professional life he covered in Norway only.
No, he was here till he was 50 years old.
Ah, okay.
So he painted over here. He was part of a movement called the Group 1890,
Okay.
which Jagdish Swaminathan, who I talked about, had started. So, but he was, a lot of people feel that he was the one who started abstract painting in India.
Okay.
Before that, it was mainly figurative. So, and for me, actually, these the works are very emotional. So, when someone asks that what is abstract, you can't see anything in it. But I think that, or you can't understand it. I feel that art is not meant to be understood. It is meant to be perceived or felt. There is
Absolutely.
nothing to understand in it. It's like someone always says that suppose you see a sunrise. After all, when you go to tourist places, they have a sunset point, a sunrise point. अब उसमें अगर आप बोलो कि हमें ये समझ नहीं आ रहा, तो वो तो समझने की तो कोई बात नहीं है ना. अच्छा लग रहा है, you're feeling it, you have certain emotions related to it. So वैसे ही abstract है, आपको
Especially when
समझने की
you-
कोई बात नहीं है.
Especially when you've met the artist and you have made the whole biography around it.
Yeah, yeah. So I think abstract painting is important because it is just something that you should feel and relate to.
Absolutely.
These works are also very dear to me. They are by an artist called Jyoti Bhatt. And Jyoti Bhatt, with God's grace, last year he celebrated his 90th birthday.
Oh.
He lives in Baroda and he studied at the MHU University, Baroda. And he actually does prints. Now, this is another thing which, like I said, education is very important, that When people think of prints, they think that they're prints like a newspaper print or a magazine print. But these prints are not those prints. These are what they call graphic prints. And what happens is that the artist works on a plate. It can be a wooden plate. It can be a what they call a lino print, which is a sort of a lino sheet, or it can be a steel, a metallic plate. And on that plate, the artist makes a sketch, and then with an acid, he burns into the lines of that sketch.
Okay.
And then there are manual printing presses which they have in their studios, where then that piece of paper is attached, and the imprint of the metal sheet or the wooden piece is taken on that piece of paper. And then each layer by layer, each color is put.
So I can see so many colors are there.
Yeah, so
Like, you can
each
see the
piece
whole-
of paper goes through those many cycles to get each color. And so it has to be completely aligned for each color to come on. So in both these prints, you see, and these are all limited edition. So
Okay.
they're not as if they're unending. So if you
Unending.
see, each has a number on it, has a edition number on it. So like say in this, I need my glasses. Whatever number you see, so you say that
2
these
by 25.
2 by 25, so there are 25 of these
Okay.
ever made.
You have the second one.
And I have the second one. And after that, what the artist often does is that after the number is complete, they scratch out the plate.
Oh.
So the plate is scratched out, so that plate then can't be used
So
again.
remains the limited version.
Yeah, so it remains a limited version. In fact, Jyoti Bhai is one of India's foremost artists and printmakers. And last year, the Smithsonian Museum in America actually acquired a lot of his prints for their collection.
Oh.
So he's a very important artist, and he primarily does printmaking.
You have a lot of these I can see in your
Yeah, so
staircase
let's
also.
move to the staircase. I
Yeah.
can show you some more of his works. Okay, so see, these are some more of Jyoti Bhai's prints. And as you can see, like this one, I was talking about the
Okay.
wood cut. So when they say wood cut, then the original thing would have been sketched out on a piece of wood.
Oh.
And then the paper is put on the press, and that impression of the woodcut comes on the paper. Similarly, these are also some beautiful works, and when it says 5 by 30, that means that there are only 30 made,
You have the fifth
and
one.
you have the fifth one. So it's important also, because people must understand that these prints, which are called graphic prints, are all like original pieces of art. Also, because it's such a labor-intense process, no two print is exactly the same.
Okay.
क्योंकि टेम्परेचर का फर्क है, प्रेशर का फर्क है, सबका फर्क होता है. So there's a slight variation in each print. So it is an original piece of
So
art.
this is something new, because a lot of our audience does not know
Yeah.
why the prints are being sold so expensive now.
Correct.
So that's one of the reasons, that probably because these are like limited also, and
Yeah.
secondly they've been made through a process.
Yes, and each one is an original work of art. No two pieces are exactly alike. I mean, the image may be the same, because each one is done individually. There will be some small variation in each. So this is currently this is my craze.
Okay.
Graphic prints. I'm in love with them.
I find this sculpture also very interesting on your staircase.
Yeah. So sculptures also has been a great love of mine, and this one is by Mukul Panwar, who's a very senior artist. He's been working in Garhi Studios in Delhi, which are the Lalit Kala Academy studios, and he works in a lot of mediums. So it's there's a marble, there's different types of stone, and also in bronze. He does a lot of bronze casting. So this work, of course, is of this Nandi bull, and yeah.
The natural lines are quite amazing on it.
Yeah. And when you imagine that they start with a block of
The
stone, they don't know what is going to emerge out of that block of stone. So you have to visualize, you have to see, like for this, he would have had to visualize that around the area of the neck he wanted
That's
the
what I was
lines,
coming
you know,
to
because
actually, yes.
it gives you that impression of वो जो बैल में लगाते हैं.
Right.
So for the artist to be able to visualize that and then to do it by hand according to that visualization is something which is just tremendous.
Yes, amazing piece. This wall is quite interesting. I think these are like old prints.
Yeah, these are old prints. Some of them are the Raja Ravi Verma prints. And what I find very fascinating about them is that how they were embellished by the households which owned them. So these Raja Ravi Verma was actually, he was very crucial in popularizing Indian art and Indian deities, because at that time he, earlier he used to paint,
Right.
but then he started his printing press. And through the printing press, he made these prints, which were then circulated in all homes of the time to be put in the pujas.
So all this must be the original zari and all.
Correct. So what people used to do is that when they got the prints, then the women of the house used to put zari and put clothes and all on top of the Ravi Verma print. So they were all embellished. Like in that one, you can see that the peacock is decorated. There is a mala around him. There's zari over there, and this is all old Purani, मतलब असली चांदी की जो zari होती थी.
It's quite amazing how you have put it up with the modern artwork that you
Yeah,
have.
yeah.
The wall looks amazing to put, different collage of different old prints on a wall
Yeah.
and gelling up with the whole contemporary theme. It's look amazing.
So also what I do is that whenever I bought these, like this one I bought from Pondicherry. We'd gone there for a holiday,
Okay.
and there are these shops in Pondicherry which, and as you can see by the frame,
Yeah.
it was just lying in one corner. But I feel that's the beauty of it.
It
That
actually looks very
old
pretty.
frame,
Yeah.
to put it in a new frame, it would not look, so striking as it does in the. Also, I think associated with that old frame is the fact that किसी के पूजा में थी,
authentic.
हाँ, it looks authentic and वहाँ थी, इतने सालों से रही, तो it's in that, like this is actually not Ravi Verma, but at the same time there was a press called Brijbasi which was operated out of Delhi.
Oh.
And a lot of them, what they used to do is that they used to send for their printing, they would send it to Germany.
Okay.
So you have these German-made prints because quality of printing was very high in Germany
So
at the
they've been
time.
printed in Germany.
Correct. They've been
Oh.
printed in Germany and then sent here for mass distribution. So this one is actually one of my
So
favorites.
these must be happening late in like 1947
I
or
think
50 something.
this is also
Because
dated.
post that to printing presses were quite.
Yeah. So this is 1935.
So that's
So
what
this
I was
is
thinking.
pre-independence.
Pre-independence. Yeah.
So it was sent to Germany and then printed over there. So yeah, I have a good collection of these.
They look very pretty.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah. I think to place them together also sort of makes them more significant.
Absolutely.
Because if you see them one off, then it looks different, and then when you see a whole range together, then
it
they
becomes an
appear
art
different.
Form.
Correct. It becomes like an
Something
installation
created
almost.
by you.
An installation. Yeah. Correct. Right. So Kshitij, let me also show you something which I'm very fond of. Is these old Bhuta masks.
Okay.
Which again I've collected from Sundarnagar, from the shop that I used to go to as a child, with my mother. And let's go there and
Come.
we'll see.
Okay.
So these are what are actually called Bhuta masks.
Okay.
And I think it comes from the word bhoot, but I'm not sure. But they are traditionally used in parts of Andhra Pradesh,
Okay.
where once a year they have a procession, and on a big pole these masks are put, and then the whole village moves behind them.
Okay.
And I think they are basically to drive away evil spirits. But I think what's beautiful about these masks, of course, one, you can see, the quality of metal used.
Yes.
Again, because they were used for this religious procession, and it had to do with the spiritual content of removing all, evil from the village. The quality of metal used was very high grade. And then again, a lot of them are made of the lost wax technique. So each one is individually crafted.
And I think that most of them signify either Vishnu avatar or Shiva avatar.
I think so, yeah.
Because like you can see a moon on the head,
On the head,
then
yeah.
there are snakes,
Yeah.
and this is,
yeah.
I suppose, the Vara avatar.
Uh-huh.
That is definitely a Vara avatar.
Yeah,
up
that is
there,
a
the little one,
boar.
and
Yeah.
you've given a right position
On
to that
top, yeah.
on top of it.
Because it was lost in the gold,
Yeah,
but then at least now it stands out. you
yeah,
know?
but it's looking very pretty.
Yeah.
You know, at least I get my eyeballs over there because
yeah.
out of all these
it's
five,
different.
it's
different.
different,
Yeah. So these were very. I love these. I love these.
And you know, after looking at this, I really want this kind of a wall in my house also.
You better not, because I've told your dad to save all of them for me. So you better not.
Even these two art forms are quite amazing. The way you have done this wall is also very amazing.
Yeah, so this is again one of my very favorite artists called Jagdish Chandar, and there's a very interesting story behind my acquiring these works. So I was a great, I really liked his works and I wanted to get some, but I was not being able to. And at that time, he used to work in Garhi, in
Okay.
the Lalit Kala Academy studios. They are behind LSR College. So every time I used to go to Garhi, his room used to be locked, his studio. So once what I did is, and he used to have a big tala there. So I put a slip that Jagdish ji, this is Dr. Shruti, and this is my phone number. I want to buy one of your works, so please get in touch with me. So he finally one day he called me and he said, "Okay, you can come to the studio." And I went there, and he didn't know me, who I was, what. So artists are also, when they're selling directly, they want their work to go to a good home.
Good owner.
It's not कि हमने बेचना है, ऐसे नहीं होता है, because it's such a labor of love कि they
Yeah.
want कि जिसके पास जाए उसकी इसकी कदर भी हो.
Absolutely.
So he just showed me 2-3 works. He says, अगर तुम्हें चाहिए इनमें से चुन लो. वैसे मेरा कोई एक बायर है, वो आएगा तो मुझे ज्यादा नहीं दिखाने हैं तुम्हें.
अच्छा.
मतलब frankly. So then out of those 3, this was the one that I said, आप ये मुझे दे दो. So he said, अच्छा ठीक है. So these are very
And
strong.
this you bought later?
This I bought later, a few years later. But what I found was that these, I'm also very fond of these old, cast iron railings that used to be used in these old homes on the staircases and the balconies. So I had bought these, and
This
I
is
found
a very
that
interesting idea, the way
idea.
you have made the
Made it,
whole
yeah.
space.
Yeah.
I mean, contemporary and something vintage.
Yeah.
And
So for
infusing
me,
together.
these works are also very strong works, and there's something gothic and dark about them also. And these railings are also very gothic.
Right.
You know how the gothic architecture used to be in British times. So I felt that they went very well together, and in some way the rust of these was also matching the color of the works.
Yes.
And so I felt that they would look good together. And I think they do look good
They
together.
look perfect.
Yeah.
In fact, behind the bar, they look
Absolutely.
perfect.
And also it gives space to both the works.
Yes.
Because both the works, if they were kept very close together, you wouldn't have been able to really appreciate
And they
them.
are very distinctive.
They're very distinctive works, so it gives them the space
Yes.
to be viewed as a collective also, but also separately. So I like that about it.
Even I like the placement of that Ganesha looking inside.
Yeah.
Normally people put something like Ganesha
Yeah.
on the door.
Correct.
But this Ganesha
Yeah.
looking inside,
Yeah.
inside your house where the couch is,
Yeah.
the placement is very amazing.
So actually, my mother, she used to work with artisans from Odisha to do
Okay.
stone carvings.
Okay.
And then she would give them her specifications, and then she would hold exhibitions of these stone carvings in Bombay. So this is one of her Ganeshas
Oh,
that
it's part of her collection.
collection.
Oh, great.
And the good thing about this is that these days when you see these stone carvings, the front is carved, but the back usually is plain.
Right.
They have a plaque at the back, but this is carved three-dimensionally. So when we shifted into this house in 1992, she gifted this to me as a housewarming gift.
Wow, amazing.
So, yeah.
Amazing.
So that's
And it has really another aura
yeah,
to your
it does.
whole decor.
It does. I think it's my mother's blessings also in this house.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Even this installation is amazing around Pichwai.
Yeah. So I have always loved Pichwais, and these are all old Pichwais. So
Okay.
you can't just get them all at one go.
Right.
So I think it's taken me years to collect them really. And I kept sort of putting them away till I felt that I had enough to make them into a group. And the old ones also, like if you see the blue color in them,
Right.
so the blue was used by Indigo, by
Okay.
taking the indigo, and it was not blue paint, it was done by जो पौधा होता था इंडिगो, उसका पाउडर बना के उसको घोल के फिर लगाते थे. एंड ऑल्सो जो हर एक मतलब like if you see them like this, they all you feel कि श्रीनाथ जी हैं हर एक में, but everyone is a different way of श्रीनाथ जी का श्रृंगार. तो एक रात का होगा, एक सुबह का होगा, एक खाने के समय.
8 procession. They have 8 times changing of
of clothes. Yeah.
in a day.
So like this black and white you see over here, ये रात का श्रृंगार है ना, कोई सुबह का है.
This looks like the afternoon sort of.
Yeah.
Or maybe morning.
And even in these, because they were all old, I kept the original frames. That's why if you see, none of the frames are matching.
Yeah, but they look nice.
But
together.
I feel that adds to the whole thing. So I feel that when you're collecting, then be patient.
Right.
You're not going to get things at one go. So spend time, collecting things. And anything that you like, I mean, start a collection. After all, what are museums? Museums are collections of works of art. So within your home, start collecting, give it time, work up your collection, and then display it, because that is unique to you. It's what you liked, it's what you collected. So I think that then, transfer, like when I first made this display, I didn't know if anyone's going to like it. It was just that something I had collected over years, so I held it very close to my heart, and then I just put them all together.
So your suggestion is amazing. Buy for what you like,
yeah,
and then put them when you feel that the place is perfect.
Yeah.
But keep collecting.
Yeah, keep collecting. Keep collecting.
Right.
These days everyone wants everything instantly. So if you have a wall, you want to instantly have it, look
Done.
good. So put something there while you're collecting for what you
collecting.
eventually want to be there. That's important. Patience is important for anyone who's collecting anything.
Absolutely. To change your house into a home.
Yeah, correct.
So I can see in your house you have lot of contemporary and traditional mixed. How do you manage that? Nowadays, people are going for more minimalistic looks, more contemporary sometimes, even modern sometimes. How do you mix that?
So actually, in my mind, there is really no distinction.
Okay.
I feel that even our contemporary art has, after all, originated from a journey of traditional art.
Right.
Isn't it? It has evolved and reformed and transformed itself. So similarly, I feel that I'm passionate about these old diyas. I've recently become very passionate about collecting these old vessels like the urlis in their different forms, or small vessels for for the puja, used for the puja. So I actually feel also in a home there is no need to segregate things, because your home is a confluence of what you like and your personality. And in that, you can't have a distinction that, okay, it has to be contemporary or it has to be, traditional. So a lot, like when we travel, I always, before going, I research out the local craft markets. So I find that the local craft, from even from overseas, wherever we travel, and it blends well. It blends well as long as you like it. I feel it blends, into your living space.
So what is the relevance of the traditional art forms when you see them in a contemporary form?
So, there was an artist called Jagdish Swaminathan. He did a lot of work on this, and he actually was invited by the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi to create a museum in Bhopal.
Okay.
That museum is now very well known. It's called Bharat Bhavan. And there he, being a contemporary artist, he was very clear that tribal or traditional art has to be kept at par with contemporary art. He did not believe that like these days we the general perception is that contemporary visual art is sort of higher or more relevant than tribal art or traditional art. But he was a very strong voice in India who said that no, these two are at par, because tribal or traditional art also comes out from the heart. They also, even though that tradition has been going on for centuries or years, but they are also evolving. So he actually then at Bharat Bhavan, he created two museums, one for contemporary art and one for tribal traditional art. So for the Gond painting, for Pattachitra, for various things that the villagers would paint in their houses, Worli paintings, he created a museum space for that.
Okay.
And I think with that, it's important that one realizes that actually traditional and tribal art forms are at par with contemporary art. There is no need to, put them on separate platforms. So I feel they both are equally relevant.
They do get influenced by traditional art also, the contemporary artists. Don't you feel so?
See, my influences with my mother as I was growing up, as I told you, was a lot about these traditional arts.
Right.
So uh, and not only when I'm talking about art, I'm not only talking about the visual art or as paintings. What I'm talking about also is arts and crafts which were done by the hand, like the diyas, like vessels that were used for storing grain in the earlier times.
I see you have lot of oil lamps in your traditional oil lamps rather in your house. So
Yeah.
what's the importance of lighting them around the house? And I mean, why are they in your house?
Yeah. So diyas, again, this love for diyas comes from my mother. She loved collecting these old brass lamps, and during Diwali, she would actually light them with wicks. So those जो मोमबत जो sorry,
Wicks,
हाँ, wicks को हिंदी में क्या बोलते हैं?
batti.
बत्ती, हाँ. So she would love lighting all these lamps during Diwali, and there came my love for the diyas. And then I also, would read up a little about them. That why is it so important in the culture in the South, especially, to have these diyas and to light them. And what I found is that they traditionally, what they feel is that the oil. Traditionally, there were three types of oils that were used in diyas. So either it was ghee, or it was coconut oil or sesame oil
All quite freely available in
available. Yeah, but when you did it for the temple, then it had to be ghee.
South.
That was considered the most shubh form of lighting the diya. And what they feel is that the oil is actually your ego, and then the wick are all your inner turmoils and your inner conflicts of life that you face. And when you light the wick, then that turbulence gets transformed by the illumination of the wick, and that illumination, they feel, that takes you from ignorance towards knowledge and towards joy and happiness. So I found that that was a very beautiful way of explaining why these diyas are so important in the South. And one of the diyas that I have in various forms is, I think they call it Vilaku.
Yeah, one
Vilaku is in the South, they call the diya Vilaku.
yes.
So the Neela Vilaku, which I have a lot of, and you'll see those, the Neela actually means the entrance of the door.
Okay.
So in Kerala especially, these diyas are kept at the entrance of the door, and they are lit every day. There are certain, which I didn't even realize, because in the north we don't have such a tradition of, other than the small mitti ke diye that you light
That
during
too
Diwali.
during Diwali only.
Yeah, during Diwali. But there it's a part of their daily existence. And those diyas are lit either at dawn or at dusk.
Oh,
And
interesting.
and what they do is that when they light it at dawn, then the wick faces towards the east, because that's where the sun rises from.
Sunrises.
And when they light it in the dusk, then it rises, the wick points towards the west because that's where the sun sets.
Very
So it's a way of paying homage to the, the planetary alignments also. And during festive occasions or during births or marriages and all, then they light about 5 wicks around it. Those diyas which have 5 spouts are also, I think, called panchmukhi
Oh,
or something. And what they do then is, then it's north, south, east, west, and in the fifth, they point it towards the northeast direction
okay,
because that is, I think, considered a shubh direction.
okay.
And they are so sort of attached to their diyas, they are passed down from generation to generation. So there are these old pieces which are then passed down from generation to, they're almost like family heirlooms. And
I have seen names also sometimes
correct.
inscribed on
It's
them.
very interesting that you have those names written on them. So I think one of the things which attracts me towards buying them is also this tradition of, having seen so many generations of a family, being part of their existence. And then they also have certain rules for lighting these diyas, which are considered very auspicious. So they don't place them on the ground. Often you'll see in the south that they are placed on flowers. So they feel it's inauspicious to put it on the ground. You don't, when the wick has to be sort of put out, then you don't blow on it like we blow on candles. You don't blow on it to put it out because it is considered disrespectful.
Okay.
So they'll either just dip it back into the oil or they'll put a flower on it to
Juice.
to let it go down.
Okay.
The other thing that they do is that every day that wick has to be changed. They will not light it with the same old oil and the old wick. Every day it will have to be changed. So these are things which are very interesting, and I found that the quality of brass or bronze used in these diyas has a certain luster to it which we don't find in the new brass.
The new brass.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think because in the proportion that they mixed the metals, especially because these were being used, for auspicious purposes or in temples, that the proportion of the metals were of a very high quality.
I suppose vintage the smiths जो पहले यूज करते थे metal, that was more auspicious. Like I have heard that they used to mix gold, silver, and all of
Correct.
these ashtadhatu.
Ashdhatu, yeah.
Abhi to they are like more of a brass only,
Yeah.
and not very obviously the metals have gone expensive now,
Yeah.
so the luster will be there.
Also, yeah. So also they, I think the craftsmen who made these diyas, they had a very stringent, routine to follow at the time that they were casting. A lot of them are the lost wax technique also, no? So they had a wax mold, which was then.
What exactly is lost wax?
So lost wax is when the original cast is made in wax,
Okay.
which is easier to mold because wax is a softer object, and then it is put into a mold, and then metal is poured in that mold. So when they pour the hot metal, the wax melts and the metal takes its place.
Oh, quite interesting.
Yeah, so that is the lost wax technique. So a lot of these diyas are made with that lost wax technique, and the craftsmen who were making them, especially when they were made for the temples, could not eat non-veg, had to abstain from any sexual activity if they were married. They had to live separately because that ashtadhatu was considered almost a sacred thing, that you're handling something for God. So I think that energy is also there in these diyas. I mean, when you see these old lamps, it's not just an object. There's a story behind it.
Right.
There's that story of the craftsman who sort of changed his life in order to make those diyas.
And they have been made with so dedication.
Yeah, and then a lot of them, that's also, I think, a sign of the age of the diya. They don't. Some of them have this. You can unscrew each part of them, but some of them have a very complex way of the way that it gets attached. It's just a clip-on attachment, and in such heavy metals with lost wax technique, to have these different parts cast in different molds, yet they fit so perfectly into each other, is completely amazing. They didn't even have machines to do it. It was all hand done. So
Any other lamp besides Neela Bilaku?
the other ones are the ones which have the multi-tiered lamps. So I have one beautiful one which has a peacock on top, and of course the idea was to provide that luminosity in the temples. Also the hanging lamps. The hanging lamps were very beautiful because it also what tradition says is that they felt that it was a light coming from God
Okay.
because they hung it from the top. And most of these lamps were like panchmukhi. So they had a wick on all in all five directions, and
Lighting everything around.
all around it. And those are also very special. Then there was one which was called the perpetual lamp. It has a name in Hindi and in southern
The
language.
name is quite interesting.
Yeah, what is the name?
Perpetual lamp.
Yeah, perpetual lamp. But the in Hindi name is a little not the Hindi. I think the South Indian Dravidian script. It's a little complicated. But that lamp is basically like it's shaped like a bowl with a small wick extension at the bottom. And what happens is that bowl is filled with ghee, and through capillary action, it reaches the wick.
Wow.
So, and then there is a story that where these lamps were initially made, the king sort of said that anybody who wants a wish to come true can light these lamps in the temple. And you can say that, okay, I light it every Friday, or I light it every Monday, or I light it for, 6 months at a go, and your wishes will come true, which then people started believing. But then in order to be able to light it, that ghee was needed. Ghee was expensive. So for ghee, you needed cows. So what the king started doing is that whoever made that wish for that wish lamp, he would provide them a certain number of cows. Say that they said that, okay, for 1 year we want to light this lamp. So he would give them those number of cows and say that for 1 year you have to provide so much milk to the temple so that this much ghee can come out, which can perpetually light your lamp. वो बुझनी नहीं चाहिए. But he said that at the end of that 1 year, you have to return the same number of cows to me. If they have multiplied, if you have got any calves, then those are yours.
Those are yours.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
So if he gave say 10 cows, now वो उसमें suppose 1 liter दूध चाहिए, but the rest of the milk that came out, that family would use it to sell, and to it became a source of income to them. And then when they returned the cows, then they were left with the calves. So it also became, one, it was perpetual because the ghee never died out, it was constantly provided. Two, it was perpetual because that family then prospered.
Absolutely.
Because through those cows, through the calves that they gave, the life for them carried on using that those cows.
So basically, the whole economy was running with the help of the lamps.
Correct, with the help of the lamps. Yes.
Very interesting to know
yes,
that.
Yes.
I see so many traditional arts in your house, but I have observed that so many artisans have been changing their professions now because of the poverty, or because of the art forms are not picking up. People are shifting more towards contemporary. How to make them sustain? How to make them fixed to the profession? How to make them encourage to pass on that art form to their next generations?
See, I think that's a very good question, and it's also, I think, a question in which multiple people have a responsibility to do that. One, the state governments have a
Yeah.
big responsibility because these art forms are very state oriented.
Yes.
So the state governments do have a responsibility to promote that art forms, and I think the promotion lies basically on two major pillars. One is to publicize it, and when you publicize it, then it's not only publicizing the art form, it's publicizing the process. Because a lot of these traditional forms are, the colors are made herbally, they are made organically through the local stones that are available, or the local fruits that are available. They're taken out of the, maybe the like a pink will be used out of anar, or a rust will be used out of the stone. So it's important to make people aware that how labor intensive it is, and then to also make them aware how it binds the traditional, what was done, say, thousands of years back, to the current way that the artisan is working. So like if you take the Pattachitra of Bhubaneswar, एंड यू गो टू द जो वो टेम्पल है वहाँ पे भुवनेश्वर में,
पूरी,
जो जगन्नाथ पुरी है,
पूरी, हाँ,
तो जगन्नाथ पुरी के जो फॉर्म्स हैं एंड पट्टचित्र में बहुत सिमिलैरिटीज हैं,
राइट,
है ना. तो वो जो सालों पहले जगन्नाथ पुरी में जिन्होंने काम किया, उन्हीं के डिसेंडेंट्स अब पट्टचित्र भी बना रहे हैं. सो टू रिलेट इट टू हिस्ट्री, टू publicize that, and then also to publicize that how these people who produce this craft have learnt it through generations. It's not easy to learn the way that Pattachitra is. When they make it with a very thin feathered pen. That pen is made out of the hair.
yes,
I think the hair of
yes,
an animal. So when people realize how it is made, it is not just printed on. When people realize that a lot of Pattachitra, they dry the leaves of a particular plant and then it is stitched on together, and with that the hair attached to a stick, it is painted, and to make you understand that this is an original piece of art that you're purchasing. It is not a print, or it is not a by print I mean that done in factories. It is not that. And so there is a traditional bound to it. There is an organic way in which the colors are produced, in which they create this art form, and how labor intensive it is. So one is publicity, which the state government needs to make people aware of that. And two, of course, is gallerists also, I think, have a role in it. People who are selling art have a role in that. After all, why do certain artists, of course, the artists themselves are, they are of a certain quality. They have labored to reach where they are. But a lot of times it is because they get support through galleries to make their art visible to people, है ना. So galleries should then take this art form and make it visible to people.
Absolutely, because I suppose I think that all the art forms have a particular story behind it.
Yeah.
And our artisans, Indian artisans, each and every person has a beautiful generational stories
Yeah.
connected to their art forms.
Yes.
And gallerists probably should promote that
Yeah.
to make it available
Yeah.
to people around the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that could probably help them to sell it
Yeah.
and appreciate it,
Yes.
probably,
Yes.
which is more required
Yeah. Yeah.
than being selling it just
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
understand what
Yeah.
kind of hardships
They've
they've
gone-
been through
Yeah.
and what kind of appreciation they've been looking for,
Yeah.
hunting for.
Yeah. And to understand that this is an original piece of art
Yes.
which has been born out of a tradition of a way of viewing things. Maybe Pattachitra talks about the Ramayana. So there's that historical relevance also to what they're displaying. There is a tradition of stories having passed down through the word, when it was not written, and that is how they recorded the stories, by writing them down. And there has always also been a tradition of contemporary artists being very inspired by tribal and traditional art forms. Like Picasso was very influenced by African tribal art. A lot of his works were very deeply influenced by African tribal art. So, I think most artists recognize the importance of our traditional forms. It is the public that has to be educated.
And I have noticed that they have shifted their focus, the artisans, like they have observed nowadays, probably, not many people. I mean, there are different group of people who probably are more interested in deity figures,
Yeah.
but there are people who are interested in more, modern social aspects nowadays, and they have started shifting. They have started painting for that kind of society also, not just the normal deity figures that they used to paint
See,
long
ultimately
time
they
back.
have to also make a living for themselves now.
Right.
So they will adapt to what people are sort of asking for. They will adapt to that to be able to sustain a life also.
Like,
But it's also important at the same time to not lose the what your traditional art form is actually important for. So that is also there, like now the Jangar Kalam, which is normally known as the Gond art,
mhm.
which was started by Jangar Singh Shyam. It is actually called the Jangar Kalam because it was actually started by him. So the colors used in it, sometimes now they've moved a lot to acrylic paints.
Yeah.
So sometimes they are a little jarring also. you know
Mhm.
so the simplicity of that traditional form and the reason why it is so important and so relevant should also sometimes not be lost in the pursuit of appealing to a mass sale, let's say. So because the public will eventually understand, if they're being made to understand that this is what it is, they will then start having a regard for this. Like, see the pitchwise nowadays, how revered pitchwise are.
Mm.
And people want
Absolutely.
to buy pitchwise because they've understood that there is a reason why they were made, and the how labor intensive it is to make pitchwise, and it's done with a certain sense of regard. Like, just like we were talking about the diyas also, it's not like an artist sits and paints a pitchwai. They have to get into that zone because they are putting a picture of God on that piece of cloth. And traditionally they were used to behind पीछे, भगवान के पीछे, तभी तो पिछवा ही बोलते थे. So that piece of thing, cloth that they painted was going to go to the temple to be behind the god. So there was a reverence attached to it, and there was an importance that you can paint a pichwai. So there is that tradition also behind the pichwais.
Recently, I came across a beautiful art form, Kalighat painting.
Yeah.
So I read about a couple of things, and it was very interesting to know that these artists, they shifted from deities to social issues.
Correct.
They were at the time of Britishers.
Yeah.
They, instead of painting the deities and all, they
Yeah.
started painting the
Bengali
real
babus.
Bengali
Babus,
babus,
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
You
exactly.
you have anything to talk about that? It
So,
was very interesting when I read
yeah,
that.
so Kalighat painting was actually, it was in Calcutta, the Kalighat temple, that area. So, when the Britishers and anyone who used to travel to Kalighat used to want to take some token of their visit back,
Right.
of their travel back. So the easiest thing was that they would sit, there were these painters which would line the temple, and they would have this thin paper on which they would quickly make these paintings. So they were made fast, and they were initially, of course, they were made according to the local deity and the local customs. But then people also wanted to carry with them a part of the Bengali culture. So then it shifted to these Bengali babus, and how regular life was led in Bengal at that time. So that is how Kalighat paintings became very popular and very important.
So I want to ask one more question. How do you think that Ushat Art Foundation can help in equipping these artisans to be able to available to the worldwide audience, and making our new generations, the children, aware of such art forms which have existed for thousands of years in India?
I think again, knowledge is a big way in which to make children aware, because if one talks to them about these art forms and their origins and the way they are made, then when you sort of plant these seeds in the mind of children, then as they grow, at some point of their lives, these seeds will bear fruit, that they will come to realize that, okay, this is our traditional art form, and we need to give it as much respect as we need to the contemporary art. So knowledge is the biggest way that in which you can create change.
Okay, now since we are coming to an end to our podcast, I would like to ask some rapid fire questions to you.
Do I get to phone a friend?
Yeah, you sure?
Okay.
You can. Okay, first question. Which is the one art that you cannot live without?
The one painting, you mean?
Any art, anything, any piece or any painting that you cannot live without.
A singular painting.
Yeah, anything.
Yeah.
It could be a statue, it could be a painting, anything that you feel really connected, you really want it to be
I
seen.
don't think I can answer that question because there are so many works that I've lived with now for 30, 35 years. And I think each is as important to me.
Okay. Any tradition or ritual that you are very fond of?
With respect to art,
Yes.
with respect to art. Okay, you'll have to give me a little bit of time to think about
It's a rapid fire.
Okay, but you can edit it. Let me think. Okay, so I think one ritual which is not on a daily basis, but I like to do it regularly, is to go and visit galleries, and if there is a retrospective show on, especially if the artist is present at that retrospective, I like to go and see those retrospective
One more
shows.
question regarding to this answer only. Which one artist you really want to meet from the past or present?
Well, my favorite artist, like I told you, is Ambadas, and I only met him once. I think in 2003, when I went to see his show at an art gallery in Delhi, and he was sitting there. That was just a 2-minute meeting. So, and then he went back to Norway. He passed away. So, if I could really meet and have a conversation with an artist, I think it would be Ambadas.
And this podcast cannot end without posing this question to you because you're a dermatologist. What are the 3 important things for skincare should be followed in India, in Indian climate?
The first thing which I get sick of telling my patients every day is dump your face washes.
Okay.
Just use a soap, especially in the kind of climate we have in Delhi.
Okay.
So, over time, I've learned that most of my patients look at me and sort of start doubting if they've come to the correct dermatologist because nobody tells them that. But I think a lot of the cause for skin problems in our kind of weather is using these very westernized ways of cleaning our skin, because our climate here is not like the climate in the West.
Okay.
So you can't be using their cleansing agents and feel that our skins will be okay. So you have to use traditional soaps that were meant for the Indian climate. So one is that. Two, I think people underplay the importance of exercise for skin health. So when you're exercising and you're sort of moving in a way that you're sweating, that is very important for skin health, because the toxins are getting released, your muscles are getting, like say your facial muscles are working out also. So that is very important. And three, I think nutrition.
Nutrition.
I deal a lot with acne patients, and children are eating just junk food day in and day out, and they don't realize the importance of nutrition to your skin health. So I think, yeah, those are the three main things.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for watching this podcast. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed it putting it for you. Stay tuned for more such podcasts.